Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the relative rates of assimilation. This is coming to the West, or in this case, English-speaking West anyway. The rates of assimilation and how many generations it takes to assimilate, certainly from the examples I've looked at. And I've looked at this from a lot of different angles and gathered as much data as I can. And I think after 3 generations, there are still many groups, say, coming to Australia that have assimilated by maybe 2%. Now, assimilation, by assimilation, I mean they have married outside of their genetic class and have married somebody from the local majority population. That's my sort of using that as a guide or an indicator of assimilation. There are some subset guides. There are houses that I've been into where they're fully adorned with the paraphernalia of their ancestors from generations ago, and you'd think you'd stepped into a house in another place entirely. They've kept every racial sort of trapping from their genetic heritage, and they're all over the place in the house. And they still, even after the 2nd generation, they still speak the language of their forebears in the house, and so on. So those are examples, of course, of non-integration. But not all groups want to integrate, and in fact they would sneer and look down on integration. The family members that do try and integrate are often shunned by the wider family group or tribe or whatever. So it's not always easy, even if some of the locals, say the 2nd or 3rd generation, if they do want to integrate, there's still a lot of family pressure, including various forms of what really is excommunication, brought to bear to stop them from integrating and to keep the genetic and racial purity of their class. Now, it's funny because a lot of people from the subcontinent, Hindus, they think Australian white people are the lowest of the low, and they view themselves, the Hindus, and they come from the upper caste. They view themselves as morally and spiritually superior in every imaginable way, and in other ways as well. So yet they complain bitterly about what a terrible racist place it is and this sort of thing. So I asked them directly, well, why do you come here if the place is so terrible and horrible and the people here are so evil and racist? Why do you come here? What's the attraction for you? Because it's so well run, it's orderly. There's no violence here. There's no religious violence. There's no rioting. There's it's clean. It's compared to where they come from. It's clean. The public services run on time. The schools are good. And they list off an endless array of benefits of coming here. The free stuff they particularly love, but they list off this endless array of benefits. How it's uncrowded, it's clean, it's tidy, it's so on. And so, okay, well then how can you also say it's a terrible place? It's morally and spiritually, it's the lowest of the low. These people aren't worth shit. And so all right then, well, how do people who are so spiritually and morally bereft and so terrible and horrible and racist, how have they created this paradise that has so many benefits that you want to take advantage of? And they've got no answer for that. But having a look at how different groups and races do integrate and assimilate into Australian society, at least now, I'm sure the same would be for migrants coming from or going to, say, Britain or the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and so on. So now I was sort of I had this part sketched out to go, and I saw a vid by History Debunked. I think it's Simon Webb, and he did a video about this. So I thought, I might as well finish this one off and get to it. We've got a slightly different take, and we don't necessarily agree with the same things. But if you haven't seen History Debunked, Simon Webb's channel, it's well worth a look. He does some good stuff. So head over there and have a little look if you haven't already. So I'm going to look at some different races here now. English people coming to Australia, if they've been more in southern England, Midlands to southern England, then they can integrate almost seamlessly. You know, if they've got children under the age of 10, they'll marry local people, and they'll integrate without it'll happen in one generation. If their children are born here, then it'll happen automatically. You wouldn't have the question. If the children are older, say in their 20s when they come, or late teens, they're out of the school range, then they may marry someone else from England or intermarry with other English people and hang out with her, but probably not. There's still a very high propensity they'll integrate again seamlessly. And so English people, it's very now if it's British people, say rural Scotland or something like that, they're from the rural areas and lived on small farming communities, that sort of thing. Not much school. They haven't been urbanised or gone through university to study a real course. I don't mean like gender studies or something, but a real course. Then they'll probably take one more generation to integrate. And now it's easy for them because they're white, they're Christian, they're so there are certain habits of behaviour that are very similar. So it's not that hard for them to integrate, but it may take just a little bit longer for those rural people from places like rural Scotland and so on, or even say places like rural Cornwall and the farming communities there, which is an English county in the southwest of England. That's sort of a bit out of the way from the wider London set and the bigger cities and so on. So, so the English one now, looking at these are people I've known or families I've known that I'm going through here. So Danish, the family came out when, or he came out rather with his family when he, I think, was 20 years old, and they speak Danish at home. He tends to hang around with Danish people, and he's still got a very thick accent. Isn't making much of an effort to integrate. Wants to hang around his own people. He seems to perceive Australians as boorish and uncouth and uncultured, which I thought was a bit rich coming from him. But anyway, and he's almost a dandy in the way he dresses and very, very fussy about his haircuts and everything. He's not gay, but he only wants to sort of hang around with Danish people, date Danish girls and so on. He even ummed and ahed about trying to bring out a Danish girl as a bride and gave that up as being just a little bit too third world. So he backed off from that, but did entertain it. He reckons he's tried sort of dating local girls, doesn't work. So I don't think he'll... well, last time I looked, I haven't spoken with him for a little while, but last time I looked, he isn't going to integrate or assimilate in his lifetime. I'm sure if he has children, they will, because again, he's white Christian. There's enough similarities, not all, but enough similarities there. He tended to see only the differences with the local population rather than the things that he had in common with them, and I thought he did himself and others a disservice there. But anyway, that's probably more a personal issue with him. Just in terms of Germans, they seem to integrate pretty quickly. Their children, if they come here young enough, again, they come to Australia before they're, say, 11, 12 years old, they'll integrate probably in the first generation. Definitely the children will integrate, and there'll be no you wouldn't, one generation later you wouldn't know. And so their integration is almost seamless. Even people coming to I know there's a family that migrated to Australia from Germany when they're in their 30s, and they had a recently born child, and he'll he's only dating local girls and everything. That he'll integrate, seamlessly. They're having a little bit of a struggle with it, but they're in their 30s when they came here, so they can't get rid of the accent, and they feel a little bit put out for that, because they do want to integrate and they're making a genuine effort to do that. But I've noticed most of their friends, or people they have anything other than casual contact with, are also German, suggesting that they're struggling to get away from the thing. But they are definitely wanting to and trying to. I just think they're more comfortable with people from other people from Germany, and they feel a little bit maybe self-conscious dealing with locals because of their accent and things like that. And I've spent some time in Germany and so on, so they tend to relate to me, but I'm probably an outlier in that regard. Looking at a Dutch family, they came out to Australia with 4 children. One of the children, I think, was 11, and the others were 15, 17, and that sort of thing. So the older ones didn't bother going to school, and they had quite minimal English, and that was probably a mistake. But anyway, they went out, but they've only hang around in Dutch communities. They don't. They're also from a rural farming town in Holland. They're quite basic in some ways, but the older kids only hang around with Dutch people. One of the oldest one is a boy. He did date some local girls, but it didn't work out. So he says, they've all stuck to the youngest. The youngest one is a girl who arrived, as I say, when she was 11. She has married a local guy, and the kids have integrated seamlessly, as have the children of the others, by the way. So again, it was one generation off, and if they come here young enough, then they integrate reasonably quickly, certainly by the first generation born here. So now, as a Serbian, or could be Croatian, but I think Serbian, guy came here. I think he was 2 years old when he arrived here with his parents, but they only speak Serbian in the house. So his only exposure to English was when he was at school. He started school without speaking a word of English. You'd think his parents would have been a little bit more far-sighted than that, and would have made sure that he at least spoke English when he went to school. But so they spent 3 years keeping it at home, not having contact with anyone other than Serbian kids. And so he remembers the barbs of being at school, not being able to speak English, and the crap the other kids gave him. And he's got a rather long sort of Slavic name, which didn't really help either. And his parents insisted that he had to use the full name, and so his parents burdened him with things that they shouldn't have and needn't have. So he stayed within the community. He's married another Serbian. He's married a Serbian girl who I think came probably around the same time as he did. It might have been born here, but came from a similar, quite strict sort of Serbian family. They only eat Serbian food and only talk in Serbian and that sort of thing. So that made it hard for him. So he married a Serbian, even though he came to Australia when he was 2 years old. And but his boys are in their late teens now. They're all dating local girls, so they'll integrate now. And again, they're white, and they're not interested in talking Serbian. That's all bullshit as far as they're concerned, and which he's upset about. But look, it's it's something that they're learning English, speaking well, and it's a practical consideration there. So they're taking a little bit longer. Again, his parents came from a rural sort of farming community. They came to Australia when they're in their, I think, late 20s. It's probably a bit too late for them. Whenever you get people that haven't been urbanised, and particularly the rural sort of stock, and I think it's they're like Russian Orthodox Church or something. So it's like a subversion of Christianity. Add a little bit of another overhead onto it. But so let's look at a Vietnamese family. They arrived in 1975, 2 young children, and they had another child straight away as soon as they got here. The anchor baby thing that these third world peasants always seem to want to do, and they stayed completely in their own community. They didn't venture outside of it, had no intention to, didn't want to. A lot of free stuff was given to them by the government, a lot of free stuff. So that made it even easier for them to stay within their own ghetto type community. Their children only married into the Vietnamese community, and they're to the grandchildren now, and they don't seem to be doing a whole lot better. Maybe the next generation will do it, but you're probably looking at 3 to 4 generations before they integrate. I think that's reasonable to 3 at a minimum, more likely 4, if not longer than that. So much harder for them to integrate. They don't really seem to want to. The next one is Indian. Now, the Indians, I'm talking Hindu Indians here, doesn't really matter whether they come from the upper class or not. They all seem to have a real resistance to assimilating and integrating. They seem to be quite dogged and passionate about it. So you've got a ridiculous thing where this is an example. I mean, Indians who went to Fiji to work in the 1850s. This is when Britain was running Fiji and India. So they went to Fiji in the 1850s, and there were things like sugar plantations being put there. And so they then came to Australia in the 1950s from Fiji. Now, bear in mind, they've been out of India for 100 years, more than 100 years, and they've been in Australia for more than 70 years. Or about 70 years, and they're still sending back to the village of their ancestors to get brides and husbands. Still, after 170 years outside of India, they're still sending back. And if you go into their house, it's just adorned with every Indian piece of paraphernalia. They wear Indian clothes, unless they're going out to work. They wear Indian clothes. They can't wait to get rid of their Western, when they gather together in the Indian, because they live in Indian ghettos, and they go to Indian community centres, all wearing Indian national dress and all this sort of stuff. And if any of the children attempt to go outside of the diaspora to get find a marriage partner or for procreation, they're really put under a lot of pressure by the wider family to not make that mistake and not do it. So some do, but they're often shunned and excommunicated. But the number of them that do would be 2% maximum, and I don't see it changing. They're very, very stuck in their ways. At the same time, though, they run around saying everyone else is being racist to them, which is a bit rich. Lebanese. Now the Lebanese came in 1978, I think they started, 77 maybe, they started coming to Australia. This is during the Lebanese Civil War, particularly the Christian Lebanese. Now, some of them were reasonably urbanised, as much as Beirut could be considered a major urban centre, but they were Christian or a subset of Christianity. They were certainly persecuted to some extent, at least by the Muslims and so on, but they were very basic, very tribal people, almost simple, in fact quite infantile in some ways, but they were brought over in quite large numbers to Australia. I don't know why, but the government of the day thought it was some great moral crusade to do it, and so they were arriving in the 70s, and preference was given to families with young children. As that the thought was that they would be the most likely to have one generation away from integrating. But it's actually not the case. They've stayed very tightly within their own communities. Marriage outside of it is absolutely minimal. It happens, but again, 1 or 2%. So they've stayed. Even now, the 2-year-olds that in 77, they were getting married in sort of 1999, because they get married reasonably young, their children now are sort of entering their late teens, early 20s, and they're again just staying within the community. There'll be some that'll go outside of it, but Jesus, not many. So this is again, we're looking at third generation now, still minimal integration. So if you're looking at a society where you want assimilation, integration, then either multiculturalism has to be ditched, and you say, no, you arrive in this country, this is how you're going to behave, this is how you will behave. You'll behave as the majority, which will allow you to integrate quicker, give you access to better jobs, give you access to, you'll have an easier time of things, you'll get ahead quicker, and so on. But that's something that I don't think any Western government would do today. I think they want the multicultural thing, which gives a divide and rule. Now, all of these different groups, though, particularly the Indians, the Lebanese, the Vietnamese, they all want their people. We want our representative in Parliament. So they want their own politicians to exclusively represent their interests, not the interests of Australians, but their specific interest of that specific racial group. They want their own politicians. They want their own the free stuff. They want special consideration for them. We're a separate group. We refuse to integrate, but we want special dispensations and special giveaways. And you saw that during the COVID thing, where somebody with a very thick accent that clearly never speaks English unless they have to, insisting that, I am an Australian and I have rights and I want my rights. And really, it's all a one-way thing, though. They're not prepared to do anything for the country or for Australia. They wouldn't piss on Australia unless it was giving them free stuff. And so they got no intention of integrating, and they don't even like the society. And as long as while they stay more insular and more stuck within their own diaspora, then the contempt, which ends up being mutual, starts to spread. And in the end, everyone starts sort of hating each other, and that's not something any government wants, surely. But the only way the Western governments are treating this is if these people are slow to integrate, or don't integrate. It's the white people did it. It's the white people's fault, and we just have to call them Nazi and racist just a bit more often, and that'll fix everything. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.